Jeremy with you, episode 56. I am super excited for you. This episode, I sit down with Ralph Burns from the Perpetual Traffic Podcast and Tier 11 ad agency. Ralph and his team manage hundreds of millions of dollars in ad spend on TikTok, Meta ads on Facebook, Instagram, and Google, and they've really cracked the code to be able to help businesses grow. So we dive into what's working now when you're spending ads. We talk about if you're thinking about hiring an ad agency to run your ads for you, what questions you should be asking, and strategies and tactics to help you build awareness for your games, and most importantly, sell more tickets. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Sports Marketing Machine Podcast, the podcast for those working in sports looking to level up their marketing skill sets so that you can sell more tickets and grow your fan base. I'm your host, Jeremy Neiser. Today, we are joined by the GOAT of the Meta Ads world, Perpetual Traffic Podcast host, the founder of Tier 11, the great Ralph Burns. Ralph, appreciate you coming along.
I'm very flattered by all that. I am not the GOAT by any stretch. That's Tom Brady. So just so we're very clear here, no one Patriots fan. But no, great intro, and this is awesome. Like we were saying before we hit record, the merging of marketing, sports, and business together is probably one of my favorite topics, and I probably overuse sports analogies all the time with my team and on my show. So, it was awesome when you invited me to come on today. I'm really excited to be here.
Fantastic. So I will absolutely put links for the Perpetual Traffic Podcast and Tier 11 in the show notes. So if people want to hop over and take a listen and what have you and hear some of those one-liners about sports, it's pretty easy. But let's just dive headfirst into it. What's working now? You're working with clients all over the world, millions and millions of dollars. So you're seeing so much. What's working now that driving conversions, really increasing awareness for organizations?
Yeah, what we have seen this coming for 3 or 4 years, I would say there's two parts to this, is that I would say 3 to 4 years ago, we started to see much more of a shift away from just put any ad, any creative in front of any audience, because the audiences were so good and the tracking was so good on these platforms. And then 2021 hit with the iOS 14 update. You have less visibility. There's now all these privacy concerns. So a lot of that targeting, which still exists on Google, really, but I'm talking specifically on Meta, it's just not there anymore. And so what we found for interruption marketing, just in general, we spend almost about an equal amount on Meta and Google right now, which is, hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, it's a crazy amount that we spend. But the point is that for interruption marketing, which is where we sort of started and what we're known for a bit on the Meta side, creative has become so much more important than it ever has been in the history of advertising. And it almost goes back to a lot of the same principles that David Ogilvy talked about and Claude Hopkins talked about and Eugene Schwartz talked about. We go back to those old school people because what is sort of old is now new again here, and hooks, messaging, really dialed in creative that speaks to the wants and desires of your market as well as the pain points of your market. And so much so, and we have a very, very good creative team. We're actually in the process of buying another creative agency. We have 2 other agencies. We have a 22-person team that does content creation, in UGC. So we're doubling down, tripling down on this because we really feel like the media buying element of it and the traffic element of it is a little bit more, it's standardized, a little bit more commoditized. I wouldn't necessarily say that because a great media buyer makes all the difference, for sure. With all the tools that are out there, the platforms are getting better with AI, but what they can't create is the great idea that hooks in your audience. And so in concert with that, we've seen a lot of saturation in the conversion space, like website conversions. And we talked about this before we hit record a bit, is that we're now going up funnel, full funnel, which is more consideration and awareness, using some different campaign objectives, especially for Meta, doing the same kind of thing on YouTube as well. Instead of for a call to action on some of our best YouTube ads, our call to action is to watch more videos, is to go to the page, because we realize that there has to be somewhere in between, and myself and my co-host of Perpetual Traffic always argue about this, somewhere between 500 and 7 touch points that somebody needs to have in order to take that action that you want them to take. So we're going much more up funnel or full funnel marketing, which is something that Meta, as you can kind of see, in some of their communications, has been talking about sort of this brand performance kind of marketing, which we've fully adopted, and we've always had a good relationship with them. And it's really working to scale, get our customers to that next stage of growth where they might have just sort of flatlined if they're just using straight line website conversion campaigns, or they're just using intent-based search campaigns on Google. So using more video, using a lot of creative, and then going up funnel to awareness, and not necessarily the thing that you want, but just creating brand awareness and then consideration, then ultimately them taking the action.
You mentioned on one of your podcasts the analogy of popcorn. Do you remember this analogy?
Yeah.
And it was like a light bulb moment for me. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, well, I'll steal it because it was Qasim's idea. Is that everyone just wants the ready to eat popcorn, and so you go to the supermarket and you just buy the Orville Redenbacher's popcorn, and then you throw it in the microwave and you cook it, or you just buy the bag of popcorn. Like we have a big bag of Smart Food upstairs, which is awesome, by the way, which is popcorn. But that's like the conversion, right? So if we look at advertising, that's like the website conversion ad. That is the consumption. Where does the popcorn come from? Well, most people know that pickles come from cucumbers that have to be grown, and popcorn comes from corn, which actually has to be planted. And so if you look at that, the pickle and the cucumber thing, I didn't know until my mid-20s, by the way. I thought it was like a pickle plant. So that's a total aside. But the point is that in his analogy, and I think it's an apt one, is that people now forget, I have to plant the corn in order to harvest and harvest the corn and then actually pop the popcorn, which is the final step of the process. And what we found is that, and I think Qasim has a great example of this. We have dozens of examples, but one of the ones that he used in the show was that he had a customer that had Facebook ads running and Google ads running at the same time, and their Facebook ads were getting a 0.7 return on ad spend, and so the client turned them off. And 7 months later, they all of a sudden started seeing a huge decline in sales. So this was a longer selling cycle. This could be, think of that 7 months as it could be 7 days for your product. It could be 7 hours, depending on how much of an impulse buy you have. It could be 7 weeks. The point is if you don't harvest, or if you don't plant and then harvest and then ultimately convert the eating part, it's all a continuum. And if you cut out any part of it, then your business is not going to be able to grow. You're not going to be able to sell any popcorn, which is really the analogy. So turning off those ads, and this is something that we do through a number of different attribution tools, turning off those ads that maybe don't look all that great, but what they're doing is they are feeding everything downstream at the point of sale, at bottom of funnel. And this is what I refer to as full funnel marketing. You have to really start at the top, plant your popcorn, and then ultimately plant your corn rather. You don't plant popcorn. Plant your corn, and then at the bottom of it is, you harvest and you eat the popcorn. So, and a lot of marketers forget that because they're in the moment and they forget that these channels actually work together with each other as opposed to against each other. And that's a big revelation, I think, for a lot of folks because, and especially in the agency world, we're the ones to blame for it. Because if you have a Facebook ad agency, a Google ad agency, a TikTok agency, they all want to claim credit. But if you have all of it together, you can look at it in an ecosystem with a smart media buyer in the middle of it. And then that's how we help scale and grow companies.
And it's such a great example. The Golden State Warriors did this back before they had Steph Curry. They would have videos of him shooting half-court three-pointers and making them, and they were running ad dollars just to the videos, just to get you excited to see the guy. And then if you've watched 50% or 75%, they'd come back around and say, hey, buy some tickets. So it was like a two-step process, but they were building that video view audience. And so I go to teams and I say, just do that. If you just do that, you're going to be successful.
It's so true. And I know the guy who ran those ads. That's Dennis Yu way back when. And it totally works. So, I mean, he's been saying it. We've been saying it. This is not a concept that hasn't been around. It's just that I think we all got spoiled because we could attribute every damn last dollar to a platform, especially on Facebook, or so we thought. Now that is not the case. I mean, you have to have sort of a multi-channel spread and look at everything holistically. And sometimes, in a video view, for example, for, Steph Curry shooting baskets from like, the second deck, like that's, you can capture that video view audience, which is great in app. But think about like that level of awareness. You could run YouTube videos for that. You could do TV ads potentially for that just to get people excited. And it's harder and harder to attribute that if it's not in platform. A very easy way of doing it is just what you're doing. And if we're talking to sports marketing people, like that is the most basic of basic things that you can do with everything that we've just talked about in the last 15, 20 minutes here is do exactly that.
Mm-hmm. Let's dig into tracking a little bit. One of the things that I've found is sports teams, a lot of which are archaic in what they track. All right, we're tracking, we've got new followers, we're tracking video views, but they're not really tracking and doing the attribution of, well, where did the sale come from? We can track in ticketing software now. There's a lot of advancements, but let's just talk about tracking in general and why is it so important?
You're never going to get it right. You're never going to get 100%. And like, stop trying. I mean, there is an element, like you have a podcast, okay? I have a podcast. I have no idea, like there's no way for me to track any customer at Tier 11 unless they fill it out in my application and say podcast was the reason why they filled out the application. Usually it's because they clicked on like a Google ad or Googled Ralph Burns or Tier 11 or something like that. And they say, yeah, I found you on Google. But did they really? So it's like you have to sort of take this leap of faith that part of your overall marketing, you are not going to be able to track. But what you do have to do is you have to look at your total marketing efforts and then what's coming out the other side. What's the return on it? And this is simple, but it's not simplistic and it's hard for people to do. And we do this. We track our marketing based upon cost per content produced. Like that's the biggest thing that we do. And we add up all the salaries, all the ad spend of our entire marketing department, which includes like a percentage of my salary, which is everyone gets paid more than me at Tier 11 anyway. So it's not that much. The point is like we figure that out and like, what are we getting from it? And that's our media efficiency ratio. And that's how we look at things. And for us, we know we have about a 60-day cycle. You need to know these things. Do I have a 7-day cycle? Do I have a 7-month cycle? Do I have a 17-month cycle? You need to know all those things and then look at your ultimate source of truth, which should be your CRM, which should be, your Ticketmaster account. I don't know exactly how, folks would typically do it on the ticket side, but how many tickets are you selling? And then that's how you figure out how you should distribute your individual advertising dollars. It's harder to do, especially when you go offline. When you go offline, you have no way of knowing. Online, you have at least a way of knowing, but it's all click-based. Let's remember it. Even the best attribution softwares, and we happen to love Wicked Reports. Wicked Reports is a tremendous software. I think it's actually better than Northbeam in a lot of ways. Those are the two that we really, really like because they track clicks. They do not track anything aside from that. So there is a certain amount that you're going to never capture. And, I think that what you're referring to, and Qasim says this, like tracking is impossible.
Yep.
It is impossible. But it's possible to get enough of a view of it. It's enough to 80-20 it, I think, especially online, and really then compare, am I making sales from it? And a number of times we've used this example where we're running Google and Facebook together, and all of a sudden something happens to the Facebook ad account. Like it get a temporary ban or something. Like, you never know with Facebook and Meta. And then 5 days later, the sales of Google all of a sudden drop. And it's because they're working together. So that's correlative. And I think what you have to do oftentimes, you have to, scale up on some platforms that you might not think are actually creating the conversion, but they are leading to the conversion. And that's how we do it. We do it very incrementally with our customers. We don't do it all at once, but we have very, very good tracking using Wicked reports and so some proprietary stuff that we do inside Tier 11. The point is we have better tracking than anyone else, but we're not tracking everything. So that would be my recommendation. For online tracking, I would say, Wicked is probably the best one that's out there. Northbeam is second place, I would say. Do your conversions API integrations with Facebook, do your offline conversions with Google and Facebook if you have offline conversions as much as possible. Track as much as you possibly can, but there's always going to be an element of the unknown.
Yep. Yeah. There's that gray area. That's one of the first steps. When I sit down with teams, we just say, okay, let's create some marketing source codes. So when you send out an email, let's see how much you made from your email. Let's see how much you made from your text message that you send out to your fans. If you just do that, you at least have a better understanding of what's resonating, what's working, what isn't. And then you can always layer more stuff on there. But it is like day one with teams. It's really interesting to see and here you all talk about how organizations are doing such a great job or learning and getting better at tracking. Then you see completely on the other side of the spectrum where it's like, we don't do any tracking.
We don't have, if you're not doing any tracking, you have to do some tracking. Bitly is like a great example of just do that. That's free up until a certain point and then you have to pay. But you should at least be using GA4. You should be putting UTMs on all your links in your emails. At the very least, start there. Start at the very bottom of funnel. People who know, like, and trust you, start tracking that. Start tracking which email do I send with which subject line is the thing that converts the most. Well, that gives you data that says maybe that's something that I should take that copy and maybe put that into an ad or maybe an awareness ad or a video or something like. Every little piece of data should lead you to better decisions, but you're just never going to get it 100% correct.
You were right about that. Just talking copy really quick, I tend to lean more towards the Donald Miller story brand, keeping it very simple. Is there a specific process? You're shaking your head. Yes, I'm presuming you're working on the same stuff.
I love Don Miller. I would say if you're marketing, you're listening to this podcast and you don't know who he is and you're running a marketing department or doing any sort of marketing, go out and read that book, get the Audible, listen to it like 20 times. I have listened to it at least 20 times. I know Don Miller, so I know which is great, but just I think if there are people that are listening to this show that are just sort of starting in marketing, I think it's the best place to start.
100%.
But I read it at least once a year, at least. And I would like to think I kind of know what I'm doing, but it's the basic concepts. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Be the guide and not the hero.
Correct. Yep.
Just basic concepts like that. And it'll make you a better marketer at a very basic level, but then it'll make you even more sophisticated as you grow and you gain more experience because those concepts, I always say, it's all about shooting free throws. It's like
that's the foundation.
Do the foundation over and over. In marketing, sports, business, it does come down to the fundamentals. It's like that's it. And that's why it's so fun to have a show like yours where you're talking about all those sort of things. Like what did John Wooden do? Like the first practice, like how to put on your socks. Yep.
And he taught people how to tie shoes. Yep.
How to tie your shoes. You will not touch a basketball for like 2 weeks, I think. Socks and shoes were different back then. So maybe not as much today. But the point is like the foundation, I think, is really, really the best. And I would say that's a tremendous resource, Don Miller's book.
Yeah, absolutely. Which leads to the great next question here. Mistakes or areas of improvement. You're rolling in a lot of clients, you're integrating them, you're meeting with them, and you're getting access to a lot of the Meta platform specifically. And you can see when they're running ads, what are some things that you see that you immediately like, hey, we can easily make some improvements here?
Yeah, I would say for higher volume, if you're doing one of the biggest mistakes I think we see, we actually have a call with a client in about a half hour right now. It's their biggest problem is that their agency is claiming credit for all their Facebook sales.
Oh, man.
And what they are is they're mostly view-through sales. So just looking at that, and there's a little section inside, when you go into Ads Manager, look at one-day view through versus 7-day click. And then there's a 28-day click as well. But those are the two ones that are actually really, really important. So if you're running a lot of traffic, like I would say hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, look at that, because you might be able to reduce your ad spend and not have any reduction in your sales. So for this client that we're talking to in a half hour or so, I'm like, we could cut your ad spend by, you could save 50 grand and your sales wouldn't even go down at all. So look at that view through versus click through inside Meta. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that most folks just jumble all their levels of traffic together inside a Meta ad account. We see this all the time, is that they have their retargeting audiences mixed in with their cold audiences. They don't do any exclusions, which is basically anybody who's visited your website or visited your page or is a customer. And so what you really want is, like, people hire us to help them scale and grow their business and achieve their vision. The only way you can really do that is to exert more influence over people who don't know who you are, which is to acquire new customers, right? So at the very least, you should separate out your levels of traffic for cold traffic. Put in exclusions for your list. Put in exclusions for your current customers. Put in exclusions for people who have visited your website. It's not going to be exact. The match isn't going to be perfect. But what it will do is it will show you exactly how many people you're converting or you're engaging that don't know who you are. And those are new customers. And then if you tie that with, some of these attribution softwares that can show like new customer acquisition costs, like Northbeam and Wicked do, you can really laser focus in on acquiring new customers as opposed to just selling to the old ones. Because you really that's wasted ad spend, in my opinion. So one of the biggest things that we see is that we separate out levels of traffic based upon cold, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, which is the 5 levels of traffic, which we've talked about on perpetual traffic many, many times. And each level has a different type of engagement or a different creative to get them to the next step of your selling process or your funnel or your customer journey. And we see that a lot. So that's what we refer to as just ad account hygiene. So I would say those two things, like for high volume ones for your listeners, and then for the lower volume ones at the very base level, separate out your cold traffic versus your retargeting audiences.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot, that they will try to put in their retargeting audience with their cold traffic. It's like, that's just not going to, you're mixing oil and water here, just using a food analogy, but it just simply doesn't work. So you got to separate the two of them. Do you ever recommend, even for teams that are just getting started, you say, hey, if you put 30% of your budget towards awareness campaigns and the other towards like actually converting, do you ever give recommendations like that? Or what's the perspective on kind of allocating budget?
Yeah, I mean, just speaking on Meta specifically, I mean, in most cases, we are, when we take over an ad account, we have 80% of the ad spend is on cold traffic. And then the other 20 is somebody who is like a level 2, somebody who's engaged with your video or maybe has clicked on your website or your landing page. Level 3 is somebody who's viewed a specific product. Level 4 is they've added to cart. Those are all warmer audiences. And so, what we found is that when you separate those out, like I was saying before, that's super, super important. But I think the biggest question oftentimes is, how do I convert cold traffic and how do I do it? And the best way to do it is through really understanding who your avatar is and like what their desires are. If you are potentially a season ticket holder or somebody who's going to buy a ticket to a Warriors game, you want to go see Steph Curry, right? But you might have just forgotten about it because life gets in the way. So put videos at the top of your funnel showing him shooting free throws or, some sizzle reel. Do those sorts of things at the very top and make sure you exclude, your people who have already engaged with your content in the past, and that's a good way to at least to start.
And that's how you would warm up an audience, no doubt about it. I think sometimes teams get lost in cold audiences versus warm audiences. In many cases, they have no idea what I'm talking about when I come walking in and say, hey, let's take a look at some of your audiences and how you're building it. Oftentimes, I see that their email list is really small. They may have 3,000 or not even that on the email list. And hey, we want to sell out every game. All right, let's just do the basic blocking and tackling before we start turning on meta and start firing that puppy up. So it's definitely interesting in a wide variety, wide options for teams to be able to dive headfirst into it. So media buyers, you talked about on your podcast before, teams have lots of media buyers or agencies in hand that are running their ads, that are providing them some sort of reporting, and I'm using air quotes here. Mm-hmm. What should teams be looking for when they're either interviewing a media buyer or have a media buyer that they're kind of curious more about? What are some questions they should be asking?
Well, I mean, the way that we do it is we actually do a show, don't tell me kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we do advertising on LinkedIn to a certain degree. I have a really great hiring team in my HR department who reaches out. I think the best potential media buyers are the ones that probably aren't even looking for a job. Mm-hmm. So there is that. So we do a fair amount of reach out. But from a funnel perspective, what sort of questions you ask them as you're bringing them in, mm-hmm. We usually ask, we do a questionnaire to start. And after that questionnaire, it just shows sort of their aptitude. Do they know what certain terms are for Facebook advertising, for meta advertising, what's the difference between a view through and a click through conversion, stuff like that. So we have them go through a questionnaire process to start off with. And then the second step, and we've modified this a bit over time, but we've found that this is really effective, is we have them go through what's called a simulator. Mm-hmm. So we'll send them and have a very specific instructions that say, all right, in 7 minutes or less. If it's over 7 minutes, you're clearly can't follow directions. Mm-hmm. But we did hire one guy one time, I think, that did a 10-minute video, and he's still with us to this day. He's one of the best media buyers that we have. Anyway, the point is that in that simulator, we just give them the stats. All right, your click-through rate is this, your CPA is this, the goal is this, your customer acquisition cost is this, here's your landing page conversion rate. What would you do? Tell me how you would actually solve this problem. So it gets them to start think. We start to get them to think, mm-hmm. How are they, from a problem-solving perspective, applying the knowledge that they know about Facebook ads or meta ads in this particular instance. And that simulator is 3 or 4 different scenarios. And then if they get to the next stage, then we end up going for an interview. So they go through quite a bit, and this is all sort of automated. Mm-hmm. But I would, there's a demand out there, and there's a lot of people that are looking for work mm-hmm. In the media buying space still to this day. We've found that that's the best way to do it. And we're 100% virtual. We don't have an in-office solution at all. We're all over the country and all over the world for that matter. So, but doing these sorts of quiz, application, then to a simulator, then to a physical meeting. And by the time they get to the actual, first interview, which is usually with our HR people or maybe with the hiring manager, mm-hmm. we've narrowed it down to 5 or 6 or 7 candidates in most cases. And then we just pick, however many we're hiring at that point, maybe 1 or maybe 2. Mm-hmm. And then the final step is me. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, I still interview everybody.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. It sounds like you only select the best of the best.
I think it helps. Our podcast definitely does help. Mm-hmm. I think, Tier 11's a name that people know a bit. We've got, great Glassdoor ratings. We've got, what I think is a damn good culture. So mm-hmm. we've worked really, really hard at that, and people want to be a part of building something great. Mm-hmm. I think it's why they play sports, to win championships mm-hmm. and be a part of a winning team. All of that is definitely the case with an agency. We're fortunate enough to be able to to have that brand name, but We're by no means the largest, but I do believe we are the best. So there you go. But that's my biased opinion.
There you go. Now, teams look for agencies to help them run traffic. So now we got an inside look at the caliber of individuals that's on your staff. But if teams are asking questions to agencies that they're currently working with, or maybe they are thinking about working with, what should they ask? Because you've got great media buyers, you've got a great culture, but maybe in our case, teams just aren't asking the right questions and oftentimes get pretty crappy agencies, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that talking to current customers is important. A lot of agencies don't necessarily allow people to do that. We get asked a fair bit, and I mean, it's always there's certain companies that have been with us for 6-7 years, and then there's some that have been with us for 6 months, and for that matter, like 6 hours. So every sort of stage, I mean, we find that's a very effective way to get people to understand what we're all about. We refer to ourselves as extremely client-centric. We will not sell them something that they don't need. We match a service that allows them to achieve their goal as a business, which is ultimately to achieve the business's vision. And they usually want to do that by more influence by getting new customers. So how do you figure out whether or not an agency is full of it? I think, too few businesses actually ask for references, which from our perspective it's kind of a pain, but I can see why.
Sure.
Because I think there's a lot of agencies out there that, by my last count is 42,100, but I just read another article that it was 89,000 some odd. Like there's so many agencies. And I think a lot of them just like are fly by night, came into being during the pandemic, a side gig turned into a full-time gig. There's very little barrier to entry, and then they can underprice the competition. So I would definitely check out references, talk to the individual people that they've worked with in the past. And then, maybe even if I was interviewing an agency, I'm like, all right, give me like your best customer. Give me a customer that just started. And then maybe one that, you've had some challenges with. And that will really put an agency on the spot. No one's ever asked me that, but if I was doing it, that's what I would do.
Yeah, and no doubt about that. So let's talk a little bit Tier 11. So you have this proprietary process framework called CAMP. Talk all about it. CAMP has an acronym, so I'll just let you kind of dive into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved a little bit. We're in the process of updating our site. Like we evolve what we do and update it periodically. So we're in the process of actually revamping that. But it's the basis of what we refer to as the conversion engine, which we feel like in all of online marketing, there's 4 elements. There is creative, which we mentioned, which is probably the biggest most important component right now. There's traffic, which is the traffic element, name your platform. And then there's after the click, which is CRO. The thing that ties it all together is data. And at the very least, do some tracking, to your point.
Yep.
Track your emails at the very bottom of the funnel. That's about like as bottom of funnel as you can possibly get. They're on your list. They're getting your emails. Track those suckers. See how many people are actually buying. Use offline conversions if you need to. Do an API integration with how you actually collect money for your tickets. Do that at the very least.
Yep.
So if you start there and then build sort of backward, I think that's important because if you sort of think about, and this isn't on the site, I think as of right now, if you think of CAMP is those 4 elements. What we found is that they all work together in harmony with each other, but data ties it all together, as my HR guy says. It stitches it all together. Because without it, you're blind. You don't know which creative is working. You don't know which ad set is working. You don't know what's happening after the click. If you look at all the data for all the 3 different elements, and that's in essence what customer acquisition amplification is all about, is like that's the basics of online marketing. And which platform, which traffic source, it's not really as relevant. What your creative is something that you're going to have to really work on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the very basics, just show what your product does, you know, or show the thing that they're going to get once they buy it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go see Steph Curry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's cool. Or I'm going to see, you know, David Pasternak, you know, when I go see a Bruins game. Like, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so show that. For any other brand, it's probably a much more in-depth process. And we oftentimes take a week or 2 weeks to do what we refer to as a creative strategy framework, just to get the messaging that creates or is the baseline for that creative team.
Mm-hmm.
And then that sort of feeds all the ads with the data component, giving feedback as to what's working, what's not working, so we can pivot and make data-driven decisions as best as we possibly can. You know, like I said, it's never going to be perfect in order to scale and grow, and that's how we do it.
So not only do you have expert level media buyers because they've gone through a rigorous testing, no doubt about that, but like just your process of combining a lot of the activities that teams are doing. They're doing Facebook, they're doing TikTok, some are doing Google, some are doing some Google display ads, some are even doing Google search ads, but you're tying it all together. But you have a process that says, hey, we're going to report a certain amount. And this is going to be a percentage of what actually takes place here. So if I'm a director of marketing for, you name a minor league team, major league team anywhere on the continental United States or around the globe, I'd rather work with a company that understands the full funnel rather than just says, hey, I'm going to run your Facebook ads or I'm going to run your Google ads, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on your budget. Like, there's plenty of companies that just need one thing and they can focus on that one thing. Yeah, I just need somebody to manage my social media. Like, that's a great place to start. Start there. And that doesn't mean that you're spending any money on paid ad dollars. You will get traction just doing that. Now, the algorithms on, name your platform are going to limit your reach to a certain degree. So that's where the paid side comes in. But at least you'll get what type of content is resonating with your audience. And then that could potentially lead to step 2, which is, okay, we're seeing that, not to use the Steph Curry video example over and over, but Steph Curry videos where he's doing trick shots is definitely something that is driving a level of engagement with these ads. Not sales, just engagement. They're getting a lot of likes, they're getting a lot of shares, a lot of comments. That's an indicator that that's the type of content that you should probably produce more of for your social. And if you want to go wider and you want to hit your geography, these are mostly 20, 25 mile radius around like a minor league ball field or like wherever it happens to be. My son plays, in the Futures League and the Cape Cod League here. It's like a 25-mile radius. Like, that's it. So to boost sales or to boost people coming to the site, all you really need to do is boost it in that local geography. And that's like dollars a day.
That's it. $5 a day. You can accomplish this.
Crazy. Yeah.
So your son plays in the Cape Cod League and then he plays in the Prospect League. Where was he playing?
So he played in the Futures League in Massachusetts here. And then he bounced around to 2 different teams. And in the interim, he played for one of the Cape Cod League teams as an alternate. He wasn't as good as like those guys. Like,
sure.
Those are like number 1 draft picks, but he played with them for like 2 weeks, which was awesome. But the Futures League is sort of a step below that. But yeah, he plays college baseball here in Boston, which isn't too much fun going to those games in February, let me tell you.
Yeah, it's not fun. Not fun at all. And several of my clients are your Summer Wooden Bat League collegiate teams, and they're averaging 2,000 fans a game, which is beating some minor league teams, but they're trying to take that next level. And a lot of the things that we talked about today, they just implement, even just running $5 a day on a video.
$5 a day.
Yeah, like you're going to make some movement here and really increase awareness and what have you. So yeah, you're spot on. So your Massachusetts area, you've got minor league sports around you, major league sports around you. Is there anything that you see as a fan that teams could do a better job from a content creation perspective?
I would say just do more of, more of that top of funnel awareness. I mean, I would say, if I were, the Bourne Braves, which is our local team, I would just a 20-mile radius in and around the field or the town of Bourne, maybe with an interest of baseball, on Meta, just boost posts for $10-20. Like, I don't even think you could get $20 a day. Just do a cycle of just really cool, like all-star plays, or just get a guy on Fiverr to do a sizzle reel for like some of the best plays for what the Bourne Braves did last summer. Some guy making a diving catch, another guy hitting a bomb, and
some fireworks or what have you.
Fireworks, or a pitcher, like some of these guys in the Cape League just throw these curveballs that just go like,
they're called Bugs Bunny ones.
Bugs Bunny curveball, like something like that, like quick cuts like that. Throw that on Reels, throw it on your social, make them 15 seconds, 30 seconds long. And then boost those like the day of game. Literally. Like, that's the thing. Like, I live on Cape Cod, and I forget like to go to Cape Cod Baseball League games. But if I'm strolling through Instagram, I'm like, oh crap, the Braves are playing today. Like, I would go. It's more like a reminder at the top of funnel. Like, that's all you need to do. And whether or not in the Cape League, some stadiums charge, some just like have a they have a collection. So it's literally like for free, or like for $5 you can go to these games. So it's like reinforce the value. That's all you got to do. Yep. And just stay top of mind at all times. I think with sports, any sort of franchise, just staying top of mind, because there are a lot of distractions. Life gets in the way. And if you're not in front of your audience all the time, you should be at the very least. So that would be my recommendation.
So we talked Cape Cod, which is on the end of the spectrum of not having a lot of budget. And we've also talked some ideas for the major league level of some teams to be able to track from reporting. If some teams somewhere in between want to reach out and learn more about Tier 11, talk to you a little bit about maybe running ads for them, what's the easiest way to get a hold of y'all?
It's tier11.com. There's a big pink button on there. Maybe by the time this airs, the site will be different. It'll be a different number, be a different color. But tier11.com, and you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm probably the most active, believe it or not. So
I see you playing the guitar a lot on there.
Yeah. Yeah, we've gotten a lot of motorcycle and leather companies recently, and people are like, I wonder why. I'm serious, actually. It's crazy.
And then the Harleys will be slowly behind that, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, they'd be a good client.
Yeah,
we
there you
do
go.
A lot of good things for them.
So Tier 11 or check out Ralph Burns on LinkedIn, and looking forward to seeing if get some teams to call you up, see if we can work together with some teams. And I think that would be a lot of fun for you and your staff to be able to help sell out some ballparks all across America.
Would love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you, Ralph.
You bet, Jeremy.